When a student struggles in chemistry, the most natural advice is you need to study more. And sometimes that's true. Chemistry does require a lot of practice. A student won't become confident with equations, units, chemical names, or multi step problems by looking at them one time. But more time does not automatically produce more learning. A student can spend 3 hours studying chemistry and still practice very little of what they'll actually need to use on the exam. They may reread the chapter, highlight their notes, watch several videos, look through completed examples, copy a solution from the book, or follow along while the tutor solves problems. All of that can make the material feel more familiar. But familiarity is not the same thing as being able to retrieve the ideas, recognize the problem, choose the first step, and solve it independently. That's why a student may honestly say, I studied for hours and still freeze on the exam. They did spend the time. The problem may be that their study method never required them to produce thinking themselves. Chemistry is not learned only by taking in more information. The student has to practice making decisions. They need to look at a problem and decide, what kind of problem is this? What is it asking me to find? Which information really matters? Which relationship should I use here? What is the first step? And how can I tell whether the answer even makes sense? If those decisions are always made by the teacher or tutor, example, answer key, or video, then the student may be working hard without practicing the skills the test will measure. There is another problem with simply assigning more practice. If a student misunderstands the process, 20 extra problems can reinforce the same mistake 20 times. Maybe they keep on using the wrong units. Maybe they confuse coefficients and subscripts. Maybe they choose equations by looking for matching numbers instead of understanding the relationship. Maybe they rush through the setup and hope the calculator will save them. More repetition doesn't automatically correct those habits. It may make them more automatic. That can be especially discouraging for ADHD students. They may already be using enormous effort just to sit down, organize the materials, and resist distractions and stay on the task. They're told the answer is simply to work longer, so they spend more time using the same ineffective process. Their efforts increase, their frustration increases, but their independence may not improve at all. Eventually, the student starts believing, I worked hard and still failed. Maybe I'm just bad at chemistry. That's the belief we want to prevent. The answer isn't less accountability, and it isn't avoiding practice either. The answer is making the practice more purposeful. A productive chemistry practice session should answer a specific question. For example, can the student identify the type of problem? Can they choose the correct relationship without being told? Can they set up the problem before touching the calculator? Can they explain why each step works? Can they solve a similar problem when the wording changes? Can they catch and correct their own mistakes? That is much more useful than saying, study chemistry for 2 hours. A student might begin with one worked example, then solve one with a small amount of guidance, then solve a similar problem without any help. After that, change the wording, the numbers, or the problem type so they have to recognize what to do instead of copying a pattern. Finally, ask them to explain the solution in their own words. That sequence reveals whether the student actually owns the process. The quality of feedback matters too. If a student completes 10 problems incorrectly and doesn't discover the problem until the next day, they may have practiced the wrong process 10 times. Earlier feedback allows them to correct the reasoning before it becomes a habit. This doesn't mean a parent needs to hover over every question. It means the student needs a reliable way to check whether the process is working. And that might include an answer key used only after making a real attempt, a tutor who asks questions instead of immediately taking over, a teacher's work solution, a well designed AI coach that gives hints and feedback without simply producing the answer, or a checklist the student can use to inspect their own work. Shorter practice can also be more productive than one exhausting marathon. A focused 20-minute session with a clear target may accomplish more than 2 hours of reading, phone checking, frustration, and half finished problems. The goal is not to count how long the student sat at a desk. The goal is to ask, what can they do now independently that they couldn't do before? So when your student struggles, don't ask only, did you study? Ask something like, what did you practice doing? Did you retrieve the information without looking? Did you choose the first step yourself? Did you solve anything without guidance? Did you get feedback soon enough to correct your mistakes? Could you do a similar problem tomorrow? Students absolutely need effort and practice, but effort needs direction. The right practice doesn't merely keep a student busy, it makes their thinking more accurate, more flexible, and more independent. In the next lesson, we'll look at another common misunderstanding. If the homework is completed and the notes look familiar, doesn't that mean the student's learning? Before moving on, think about what your student actually does when they say they're studying. Are they mostly looking at chemistry or are they practicing doing chemistry? Share one thing you notice below or write it down privately. Thanks.